In the panoramic landscape of the African continent lies the bustling village of Yamoussoukro. A place steeped in history and tradition, this was the birthplace of Félix Houphouët-Boigny, a name that would become synonymous with Côte d'Ivoire's struggle against colonialism and the quest for self-identity. Félix Houphouët-Boigny was born in 1905 to a wealthy Baoul chief. Cheerful and industrious as a child, he dreamed of becoming a doctor, a huge ambition at a time when most Ivorians were forced to work in agriculture. But the French saw value in letting a small group of Ivorians live relatively comfortable lives. Houphouët was part of a small group of wealthy Ivorians who were given special treatment by the French. His family got to keep their cocoa farms and their chieftainship. The French also recognized Houphouët's academic potential and gave him a place at the renowned William Ponty College in Senegal. The late 1920s marked the fruition of Houphouët's long-held dream. He's a young doctor in Côte d'Ivoire, not a full doctor. That wasn't possible for an Ivorian under French occupation. His intent to form a union for the protection of African medical professionals was seen as a political act. Consequently, he was sent to work in a smaller hospital, relegated to the neglected outskirts of society. Houphouët found himself in unsanitary bush villages, where he witnessed firsthand the harsh realities of French oppression. The French kidnapped young men and took them to cocoa farms in the tropical forests, where they imprisoned them in camps and made them work 12 hours a day in grueling conditions. They were paid nothing, and all they received in return was food and shelter. At first, he was reluctant to speak out against the exploitation of his people. He was a young doctor with a promising career, one of the lucky beneficiaries of colonialism. While many Ivorians saw the French presence as a foreign occupation, Houphouët saw it as the arrival of order and investment. One cold December night in 1932, Houphouët, wrestling with his conscience, took pen to paper in an article titled, "They Have Stolen Too Much From Us." It was a bold move, but cleverly done under a fake name to avoid repercussions. This marked the genesis of his transition from a favored son of the colonial regime to a voice of the oppressed. The defining moment came in 1939, when Houphouët was invited to his ancestral home to inherit the chieftainship after his brother had died. But Houphouët noticed something was missing. Being a chief was no longer a symbol of power and prestige. 50 years of colonial rule had reduced it to assisting the French in tax collection and labor recruitment. He felt deprived and cheated of his inheritance. He then decided to take back some political power from the French. At the end of World War II, Houphouët started a political movement to protest the unfair treatment of African farmers, and he was elected as the Ivorian representative in the French Parliament. His crowning achievement was the passing of the Houphouët-Boigny Law in 1946, which effectively ended the practice of forced labor in French colonies. As the 1960s dawned, the winds of change swept across the continent. Independence spread like wildfire, and Houphouët-Boigny took the helm of the newly independent Côte d'Ivoire as its first president. As President Houphouët-Boigny sought to make the country's economy self-reliant, he focused on agriculture, enticing people to relocate and join the agricultural revolution. He provided farmers with land, taught them advanced agricultural techniques, and set the stage for an economic boom. His policies usher in an era of remarkable economic growth. In the first decade after independence, the economy grew by 11.5% a year, and income per capita jumped from $70 to $1,000. Coffee production increased by 200%, cocoa production by 600%, and pineapple production by 4,000%. It was the start of what would become known as the Ivorian miracle. He also started a massive construction program, including a world-class port at San Pedro to export cocoa and coffee. A hydroelectric dam, one of the most expensive in Africa, public buildings in all major cities, and roads were built through rural areas, connecting towns and villages that were previously connected by bush paths. At the center of it all was the construction of a modern village capital in Yamoussoukro, with freeways, golf courses, resort hotels, and the masterpiece, a church in his ancestral village, the Basilica, the largest church in the world, making his mark on the nation's infrastructure. At the height of its glory, the cocoa market collapsed during the devastating economic crisis of the 1980s. And in an attempt to save the economy, Upuwe took drastic measures. He started cutting jobs in the government sector and cut cocoa workers' pay in half. Resentment over falling living standards led to calls to abandon the single-party state and institute multi-party elections. Leading the protest was a young history professor, Laurent Gbagbo. On October 28, 1990, Félix Houphouët-Boigny put himself at the mercy of his people in the country's first multi-party elections. Despite the rising discontent, he wins with a staggering 81.7% of the vote. Gbagbo only got 18.3%, but fate wasn't kind. The 7th of December 1993 marked the end of an era. At the age of 88, Houphouët-Boigny succumbed to cancer and was buried in a beautiful service in his basilica. After his death, the country fell into the same kind of political chaos that had hit so many African nations. Alassane Ouattara, who was Houphouët-Boigny's prime minister, and Henri Konan Bedi, who was the head of the National Assembly, both tried to take over as president, setting up a violent power struggle that would eventually lead to a civil war. Houphouët-Boigny's life and legacy as a privileged youth who became the voice of his people serve as a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Ivorian people. His journey, riddled with triumphs and tribulations, remains an integral chapter in the annals of Ivorian history. Join us next time for another exploration into the pages of our shared history.